Here is the brutal truth most people feel but do not want to say out loud. The moment you stopped chasing, everything changed. Not because you became cold, not because you played a game, but because your silence forced them to face something they were never ready to face. A world where your attention was no longer guaranteed. A world where they were no longer the center of your emotional energy. And that shift hit deeper than they expected. Stay with me here, because this is where it starts getting real. When you always reached first, explained more, waited longer, and kept the connection alive, you were doing more than showing interest. You were building comfort for them. You were giving them a place to stand, a pattern, a rhythm, a quiet kind of power. Then one day, that pattern broke. You pulled your energy back. You stopped feeding what they had started to depend on. And now the silence speaks louder than all your old messages ever did. That is why they notice you more now, not less. Because the human mind rarely obsesses over what feels secure. It obsesses over what suddenly feels uncertain. And once you became uncertain, once you became unreadable, once you stopped moving in the direction they expected, something inside them got shaken. Watch this closely, because what happens next will tell you everything. When you were always there, they did not have to question anything. They did not have to wonder where they stood. They did not have to feel the pressure of losing you, because losing you did not seem possible. You became part of their emotional background, familiar, available, predictable, easy to reach, easy to read, easy to assume, and that is where the hidden structure formed. Your effort became their comfort. Your consistency became their emotional safety net. Your chasing gave them the luxury of never having to lean in too far. But the second that stopped, the balance changed. Now the questions belong to them. Why did you pull away? Why does your energy feel different? Why are you no longer trying to hold what they were willing to leave loose? Those questions may sound small, but they travel deep. They move past the surface and hit the part of a person that does not like feeling powerless. Because this is not just about missing a person. It is about losing a pattern that made them feel desired without effort. And once that pattern breaks, the mind does not relax. It searches, it spins, it tries to rebuild control. This is why people often start thinking about you more after you stop. Not because they suddenly became wiser, not because they finally saw your value in a pure and beautiful way. Sometimes it is much darker than that. Sometimes your silence becomes a mirror, and what they see in that mirror makes them deeply uncomfortable. The uncomfortable part is this: they may not even miss you first. They may miss what your attention did for them. They may miss the feeling of being wanted, the feeling of being chosen, the feeling of knowing they could pull your focus back whenever they wanted. That is why your absence feels so sharp. It does not just remove contact, it removes reinforcement. It removes a hidden emotional supply they had quietly gotten used to. And the ego hates that kind of loss. The ego does not say, "I am scared." It says, "Why did this person change?" The ego does not say, "I feel unsure." It says, "They were not that important anyway." But underneath those stories, tension starts building. And tension always wants release. So even if they say nothing, even if they act normal, even if they post like their life is untouched, something inside them is moving. The silence becomes heavy. The mind starts replaying moments. The memory starts stretching small details into big meanings. Suddenly they remember your effort more clearly. Suddenly they notice your absence in places where they once took your presence for granted. And this is the point where confusion begins to turn into irritation, not always at you, sometimes at themselves, sometimes at the fact that they no longer feel as secure as they once did. Keep listening, because this is where many people get fooled. They think distance means they were forgotten, but very often, distance means a private conflict has already started. That private conflict is messy. One side of them wants to move on, act unaffected, and protect pride. The other side keeps asking questions they cannot fully shut down. Did you finally get tired? Did you find peace without them? Did someone else take the place they thought only they could hold? That is what makes your silence powerful. It creates an unfinished story, and unfinished stories are hard for the mind to leave alone. People can live with pain longer than they can live with confusion. Pain has shape, confusion does not. Confusion keeps pulling the mind back. It makes people replay old conversations, revisit old messages, check small details, and attach meaning to tiny shifts. They may tell themselves they do not care, yet still notice who views what, who posts what, who changed, who glows different now. That is not indifference. That is mental friction, and the less you explain, the more space their imagination has to work against them. They begin filling the silence with guesses. Maybe you are healed, maybe you are angry, maybe you are happy, maybe you are gone for real, and every answer they cannot confirm adds pressure. This is why some people become colder after you stop chasing, not because they feel nothing, but because they feel too much and do not know how to hold it. Silence becomes their shield. Distance becomes their defense. They would rather look detached than risk discovering they no longer affect you the way they used to. Soon that tension starts leaking out in strange ways. Not always through a direct message, not always through some dramatic return. It often begins with subtle moves, a view, a like, a random appearance, a small reaction placed carefully after a long silence. It looks casual, but it is rarely casual. It is a test, a quiet one, a probe, a way of checking if the door is still open without fully stepping through it. Because at this stage, they are not moving from confidence. They are moving from uncertainty. They want information. They want proof. They want to know if they still matter in your inner world. And your response becomes data. If you jump fast, they feel the old power return. If you over-explain, they feel the old pattern waking back up. If you act exactly like before, the mystery dies and their nervous system calms down. But if you stay centered, if you respond with peace instead of hunger, if you no longer rush to close the gap, the pressure inside them grows stronger. Now, they are forced to face a painful idea. You may not be waiting anymore. You may not be frozen in place. You may not need the connection the same way they assumed you always would. And that realization cuts deeper than people admit, because it does not just threaten the connection. It threatens the identity they built inside that connection. They were used to being the one with emotional leverage. Now they are not sure who holds it, and that uncertainty changes everything. This is the part many people misunderstand. When they start circling back, it does not always mean love suddenly became pure. It does not always mean they woke up one morning with deep clarity and a healed heart. Sometimes they are coming closer because distance made them feel unstable. They are trying to calm the noise inside themselves. They want relief. Relief from wondering. Relief from not knowing. Relief from the fear that they are no longer special in your world. That is why the energy can feel intense when they return. More texts, more warmth, more effort, more focus. It can feel like the version of them you waited for has finally arrived, and that is exactly why it is dangerous. Because intensity is not always truth. Effort is not always transformation. Presence is not always intention. Sometimes it is only pressure looking for release. They want to see if they can still reach you. They want to know if the old emotional bridge still exists. They want to repair their self-image through your response. And if you do not see the deeper pattern, you will confuse that urgency with devotion. You will think they came back for you, when really they may have come back for the feeling of being able to get you back. There is a big difference. Do not miss it. Because if the return is driven by discomfort instead of genuine growth, the cycle always finds a way to restart. The beginning will feel new, the ending will feel familiar, and by the time you notice it, you are back inside the same loop you thought you escaped. The loop works like this. When you lean in too much, they relax. When you pull back, they awaken. When your energy becomes steady and available, their effort fades. When your energy becomes self-contained and less reachable, their attention spikes. That rhythm is not romance. It is a pattern built on imbalance. And once you see it, it becomes impossible to unsee. You start noticing how their focus increases when your availability decreases. You notice how they become more emotionally present when they feel they might lose access. You notice how quickly certainty makes them lazy and how quickly uncertainty makes them curious. That is not mystery. That is mechanics. It is a cycle driven by attention, validation, and fear. And the more you feed it, the more it feeds on you. This is why mixed signals can feel addictive. They create emotional highs and lows that keep your mind engaged. One warm moment gives hope. One cold moment creates panic. One return reopens the dream. One withdrawal makes you chase it harder. Before you know it, you are not connecting anymore. You are managing reactions. You are reading signs. You are surviving emotional weather. And that is exhausting. Really exhausting. Listen carefully here because this part matters. If someone only shows full energy when they sense you slipping away, they are not necessarily choosing you. They may only be reacting to the loss of control. And if control is the engine, the connection will always feel unstable no matter how beautiful the brief highs seem. What makes it harder is that their mind may begin investing in you more the longer you stay distant. Every memory they replay adds emotional weight. Every scenario they imagine creates more attachment. Every unanswered question deepens the pull. Attention creates connection, even from far away. So while you are living your life, healing, rebuilding, and trying to get your peace back, they may be creating a stronger version of you in their head, not always the real you. Often a version shaped by longing, ego, and projection. They start comparing new people to what they felt with you. They start noticing that easy replacements do not give the same emotional charge. They begin missing not just moments, but the certainty they once had about your presence. And that is where things intensify. What started as mild curiosity can turn into obsession, not because you became perfect, not because they fully understand you, but because the story feels unresolved and their mind hates loose ends. They want to know what changed. They want to know where they lost the old access. They want to know whether your silence means strength, pain, indifference, or completion. And as long as they do not know, the loop keeps running, the inner pressure keeps growing. The thought of reaching out starts looking less risky than the pain of not knowing. That is why sudden messages often come after long, quiet periods. It is not random. It is the result of pressure building until silence becomes harder for them to carry than contact. When they finally reach out, it may come in a simple form: a casual message, a small question, a soft check-in, something that looks light on the surface but carries heavy meaning underneath. Hey, how have you been? I saw something that reminded me of you. Been a while. Hope you are good, ordinary words, but behind them is a storm. They are not only asking how you are, they are asking if the old path still works. They are asking whether your heart still opens the same way. They are asking whether they still live somewhere important inside you. And this is the moment where the whole dynamic can either collapse for good or start all over again. If you return to old habits, the old system wakes up. If you chase the moment, try to prove your growth, overgive your softness, or rush to rebuild what they let weaken, then their anxiety settles. The mystery ends. The hunger disappears. Their identity feels safe again. But if you stay calm, if you answer without surrendering your center, if you allow them to feel your change without explaining it, then something deeper happens. They realize your silence was not a tactic, it was a shift. They realize you are no longer standing in the same place emotionally, and that realization can hit hard, because now they must face something they spent all this time avoiding. You did not just step back, you became someone who may no longer need what once kept you attached. That is when desperation can dress itself up as effort. Suddenly, they may become more attentive than ever, more thoughtful, more available, more emotionally open. They may say the right things, do the right things, show the kind of energy that once felt impossible to get from them. And yes, some people do change. That is true, but many are simply trying to rebuild a broken inner balance. They want to feel chosen again. They want to feel they can still move you. They want to repair the self-image your distance shook loose. That is why this stage can feel so convincing. The effort is real, the intensity is real, the pull is real, but the reason behind it may still be the same old wound. That is why you have to watch patterns, not promises. Watch what happens when they feel safe again. Watch what happens when your attention becomes steady again. Watch whether care remains when uncertainty disappears. Because if the engine was panic and not growth, the energy will slowly fade once the fear is gone. The same distance will return. The same imbalance will return. The same confusion will return. And then you will see the hardest truth of all. They did not come back to build something new. They came back to stop feeling what your absence made them feel. Relief was the goal, not depth. And once relief is achieved, the urgency that looked like love often begins to vanish. Now here is the part that hits closest to home. This pattern was never only about them. Some part of you stayed in it because it touched something in you too. Maybe you learned to connect effort with worth. Maybe you felt valuable when you were needed. Maybe proving your love felt safer than simply receiving love. Maybe chasing gave you purpose, even while it drained you. That is the part no one wants to face. Because it is easier to make them the whole story. It is easier to say they were confusing, they were cold, they were impossible. And yes, maybe they were. But healing begins when you see your side clearly too. You may have been addicted not to the person, but to the hope, to the next reply, to the next warm moment, to the chance that one day your effort would finally be rewarded the way you imagined. And hope can keep people in painful cycles for a very long time, especially when the pain is familiar. Familiar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar peace. That is why walking away feels so strange at first. You are not only losing them, you are losing a role. The role of the one who waits, reaches, fixes, proves, and endures. And when you step out of that role, there is emptiness for a while. But that emptiness is not failure. It is space. Space where your self-respect can finally breathe. Space where you stop confusing intensity with truth. Space where you stop calling anxiety connection. Real detachment is quiet. It does not need to announce itself. It does not need to post for effect or stay silent to punish. Real detachment happens when your peace matters more than the old pattern. When your silence is no longer a strategy to pull them back, but a natural result of no longer abandoning yourself. That is when the power truly shifts, not because you are trying to win, not because you want revenge, but because you are no longer available for games disguised as chemistry. You begin to hear the difference between attention and intention. You begin to see the difference between someone missing your energy and someone ready to honor your heart. You stop romanticizing inconsistency. You stop excusing emotional half-steps. You stop calling confusion depth. And that changes everything. Because now, even if they come back, you are no longer standing there with the same hunger. You can observe without collapsing. You can listen without handing over your center. You can feel the pull without obeying it. That is growth. And growth is not loud. It is the ability to stay grounded when the old trigger appears wearing a new face. So if they return, do not only ask whether they miss you, ask whether they have truly changed their pattern. Ask whether their care remains consistent when they feel secure. Ask whether you feel peace in their presence or just intensity. One builds a future, the other rebuilds the same trap with prettier words. And this is where your whole life can turn. Because once you understand the pattern, you stop begging reality to become what it has never been. You stop trying to squeeze loyalty out of inconsistency. You stop waiting for confusion to transform into commitment just because you loved deeply enough. Love does not fix unhealed patterns by itself. Presence does not heal avoidance by itself. And your suffering does not prove the connection is special. Sometimes it only proves the cycle is strong. That truth is hard, but it is also freeing. Because it gives you your energy back. It returns your focus to the one person you can actually lead, protect, and transform, yourself. And when you choose that path, your standards start changing. Your nervous system starts calming. The old chaos becomes less attractive. The old hot and cold rhythm starts feeling heavy instead of exciting. You begin wanting what is steady, what is clear, what does not require you to shrink, guess, or chase. That is when everything shifts for real. Not when they finally understand your worth, but when you stop needing them to. Read that again in your heart. Not when they finally choose you, but when you choose not to betray yourself for crumbs of attention. That is the moment the old spell breaks. That is the moment the loop begins to die. And once that happens, even if they come back with more fire than before, they no longer meet the same version of you. So, if they are thinking about you now, if your silence has shaken something loose in them, if they are replaying the connection and wondering how they lost the version of you that once chased so hard, let them wonder. Let them feel the weight of what changed. Let them sit with the questions you used to carry alone. You do not need to rush in and make it easier for them. You do not need to explain your value to someone who only noticed it once access became uncertain. And if they return, let their actions breathe long enough to reveal the truth. Do not be moved only by timing, intensity, or sudden warmth. Watch for steadiness. Watch for humility. Watch for real accountability. Watch for behavior that survives comfort, not just behavior created by fear, because the truth always shows itself over time. Always. And here is the final thing I want to leave with you. The goal was never to make them chase. The goal was never to make them panic, wonder, or lose sleep. The goal was to come back to yourself so fully that whether they return or not no longer controls your peace. That is the real victory. That is the real shift. Because when you truly stop participating in the old dance, you do not just confuse them, you outgrow the whole pattern. And by the time they finally understand what they lost, you may already be too far healed to need the answer at all.